Hello, you're watching the Daily Climate News Show on Sky News. Coming up on today's programme. Another rise in gas prices. Sky News has learnt the government is to propose a new green tax. The US climate envoy tells Sky News that strained relations between his country and China are making climate talks more difficult. And the world's longest undersea cable brings clean energy from Norway to Britain. Hello and welcome to the UK's only daily climate news show, where we track the changes happening to our world right now and challenge those coming up with the solutions. Well, on the day that the cap on energy prices increases, pushing up costs for millions of consumers, Sky News has learned that the government is also looking at imposing a new green tax. Now, the Heat and Building Strategy will set out how the government will decarbonise heating systems in homes and is due to be published in the next few weeks. Well, let's bring in our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. Sam, thanks very much indeed for joining us. What have you learnt?
So this week we saw gas prices hit an all-time high, but I've seen a copy of the forthcoming Heat and Building Strategy, which is the government is due to publish next month, been delayed for more than 6 months. Now, this will set out one of the big aims of government, which is to find ways to encourage people to get rid of their existing gas boiler, gas being less environmentally friendly, and move over to an electric-powered heat pump. Now, the problem with the strategy is that electricity at the moment is 3 to 4 times more expensive than gas. So in order to incentivise people to switch, the government, I understand, is looking at a new levy on gas in order to equalise the prices. The strategy document that I've seen says the price differential between gas and electricity is a critical barrier to the decarbonisation of heat and will need to be addressed. It is intended that a levy on gas will be applied to licensed gas suppliers in Great Britain, and the costs are expected to be passed on to gas bill payers. The unenviable choice for ministers is, if they want to equalise the amount that you pay for gas and electricity, you either put a new levy on gas, or the Treasury would have to pay about £5 billion a year, according to Policy Exchange, in order to get rid of the existing top-up tariffs on electricity. It looks like the government are leaning towards the former, although no final decisions have been made. Government sources stress that any decision that they take will still mean gas bills are affordable.
Certainly an uncertain time for consumers. Sam, thank you. The US climate envoy John Kerry has been attending a conference in Milan ahead of the COP26 climate summit, which starts in Glasgow now at the end of this month. Well, speaking exclusively to our climate correspondent Hannah Thomas-Peter, he said that strained relations between the US and China have made it harder for him to do his job.
We can get on track. I'm confident.
Rejoin US Special Envoy on Climate Change John Kerry in Milan. Shuttling between meetings, a frantic diplomatic push just days ahead of a crucial UN climate summit in Glasgow known as COP26. His big problem right now is the world's biggest polluter, China.
Are strained US-China relations making it harder for you to do your job and convince China to be more ambitious?
The answer is yes. It's been more complicated because of other issues. Climate was going to be treated on its own, but reality has crept in the last few months, and so there's been a slowdown in our ability to be able to move.
What message will it send to the rest of the world, though, if President Xi does not turn up to COP26 in person?
I haven't really thought about it very much, to be truthful with you. I think 190-some countries will come. The vast, vast majority of countries in the world are very anxious to be part of a moment where we really turn a corner.
As host of COP26, that includes the UK, although Boris Johnson did recently refer to tackling global warming as bunny hugging and has been criticised for making big promises that lack detail.
Do you fully trust that Boris Johnson is the right person to help lead the global fight against the climate crisis?
Well, the proof is in the pudding, right? I've been impressed by the statements he's made, but in the end, we have to get there, and it's the doing. That's what will determine, what should determine the judgments people will make about Glasgow and what happens there.
Do you ever feel anger towards those nations and leaders who are not willing to act?
I feel frustration, and for the last 30 years, we have known how bad it is. I don't know. Sometimes I can reserve the anger and scream in the dark, but I'm not going to do it publicly.
Do you view COP26 perhaps as an opportunity for redemption for a generation that failed to tackle the climate crisis?
I haven't thought about it that way, no. We're a generation that marched for civil rights and for human rights, and we made a difference. So, I'm not here to apologize. I'm here to fight for the next step.
Even with all the remaining challenges, he says he's confident that Glasgow will provide that next step. The science is increasingly clear. Our warming planet needs him to be right.
Bye. Thank you.
Hannah Thomas-Peter, Sky News in Milan.
Well, in some of today's other climate news, 39 people have been arrested after climate group Insulate Britain blocked 3 motorway junctions this morning. Well, it's the 10th day of action by the activists who have pledged to continue until the government makes a meaningful statement indicating that they will insulate all of Britain's 29 million leaky homes by 2030. The Green Party has elected Carla Denyer and Adrian Ramsey as its new co-leaders. Following the announcement, Carla Denyer, a former Bristol City Council leader, said it's more vital now than ever that green policies are adopted for the benefit of our climate and our communities. And the Queen and the Prince of Wales have planted a tree at Balmoral Castle as part of a special initiative for her Platinum Jubilee. It marks the start of the planting season for a scheme called the Queen's Green Canopy, created to mark her 70 years' service to the nation and urging people to plant a tree for the Jubilee. Now, we heard earlier about the government's trying to persuade consumers to switch from gas to electricity to power their homes. Well, as we make that big move away from fossil fuels to electrification, the Climate Change Committee says the UK's electricity demand will treble by 2050. So we'll need more sources of clean electricity. Well, on our data dashboard, we track the live data of what power the country is using at any given moment. So right now, we can see here that 56% of Great Britain electricity is coming from renewables. And around 6% of that comes from abroad through undersea power cables called interconnectors. Well, a new interconnector, the North Sea Link, that's what it's called, it's been launched today and it's almost entirely sourced from clean hydro-powered electricity. It links Northumberland with Norway. And from there, Thomas Moore has this report.
Norway is one of the world's biggest producers of oil and gas, but it's water that provides almost all its domestic power. Its steep valleys and abundant rainfall are perfect for hydroelectricity.
We are on 2,200 feet.
Huge reservoirs feed a network of pipes and turbines built inside the mountains, producing so much green energy that some will now be exported to Britain through a cable under the North Sea, the longest in the world.
When we talk about this project, people in their minds have, visualizing a cable of that size, but as you say, it's not. It's about this. It's a technology that's been proven and it works, and we can assure you that 1.4 million households will get their electricity, and it will be hydropower.
The cable snakes along valleys in the west of Norway before diving beneath the waves emerging in Blythe, Northumberland. The hydroelectricity it brings should reduce the UK's carbon emissions by 23 million tonnes by 2030.
One of the big challenges in the shift to renewable energy is the intermittency of supply. Sometimes the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, but hydropower could help fill the gap. In effect, Norway could be a giant battery for the UK.
The UK now generates a quarter of its electricity from wind, but an unusually calm summer at the same time that the price of gas, the usual standby, spiked, left the national grid firing up a coal power station to keep the lights on.
As a result of this cable and all of the other cables, bills will fall. And that's because in the UK we can access cheaper energy from the continent and transport that energy through our interconnectors, meaning that the people in the UK are receiving energy from cheaper, more plentiful sources of green electricity across continental Europe.
Green energy could in time be exported to Norway as Britain's wind capacity almost doubles over the next decade. But for now, much of the electricity will be coming the other way. Once again, it's Viking power that crosses the North Sea. Thomas Moore, Sky News in Kvildal, Norway.
Now, we've heard about rising gas prices, tensions ahead of COP26 and our need to move away from fossil fuels. But what does all this mean for the government's vision for a greener future? Well, our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, is here. Tom, good to see you. Can you pull all these threads together and help us understand what it may mean?
I'll have a go, Sally. I mean, I think if we start with the electricity piece, moving away from fossil fuels is going to drive up our demand for clean electricity, maybe doubling our demand by about 2050. So we need as much as we can get. Thomas's piece there showed one way of getting it, sending it over from places where there's an excess of renewable electricity. But in a way, that's the easy bit. Far more challenging. How do we get the heat, the carbon out of our heating system? And that's the thing that we heard from Sam Coates earlier. This nightmare of how do you decarbonise the heat in our buildings, especially at a time when gas prices are just going up and up and up. Now, in many ways, what better time to try and sell the idea of net zero to people when we're becoming increasingly dependent on these very volatile gas prices? But to other people, they might say, how can we possibly afford a levy on our gas bills when they're just going up anyway? The challenge for the government, persuade consumers of the benefits that net zero are going to bring. For example, insulating your homes will reduce those bills. And those policy levers and how we get that right is so important because it's not just UK bill payers who are looking. The world is watching us as we go to COP. If we want to stand aside John Kerry and persuade the Chinese to come along with us, we need to show credible plans for action, not just sort of ambition. The time for ambition is now over, really.
Absolutely. A lot going on. Tom, thanks for talking us through it. Well, stay with us because coming up after the break, I'll be joined by co-founder of Earthrise, Alice Adey, and New York Magazine's editor-at-large, David Wallace-Wells. We'll be discussing whether individuals should pay to make their homes greener and if we should worry about eco-anxiety. Yes, it's a thing. We'll be talking about it after this short break. They're standing by. Do join us.
They have breached the road. There is a lot of gas being fired all around us. शांति से इनको समझाओ वरना ये हम लोग It is an absolute carnival kind of atmosphere out here for Prime Minister Modi's decisive victory. These students are defying the prohibitory orders and now they're going to be arrested. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. What is feared that over 200 people might have died because of these landslides. This on any given day would have been bustling with people, but today it's absolutely deserted. This is one of the most sensitive areas of northeast Delhi where there's been clashes. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
We don't understand that every lake or a pond is a habitat in itself, which houses frogs, snakes, crabs, turtles, birds, so many different life forms. Human beings directly depend on underground water source. So a lake or a pond is necessary to replenish these groundwater resources.
Did you know that driving us to school creates extra toxic air at drop-off and pick-up times?
It'll be a chilly start to Saturday for many, but cloud and rain gathering in the southwest will push its way northeastwards through the day to give some very wet weather for many parts. Parts of Ireland, northwestern Scotland will fare a little better, but even here there'll be some rain. And looking at temperatures reaching a high of 16 or 17 degrees Celsius at best, that's 63 degrees Fahrenheit. However, these very unsettled and blustery conditions do mean that air quality will remain quite good, with pollution levels being low throughout the day.
The Air Quality Report, sponsored by Philips Air Purifiers.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. And we're getting straight to discussing the climate issues of the day with the co-founder of Earthrise Studios, Alice Adey, and journalist and best-selling author David Wallace-Wells. A very warm welcome to you both. Well, we've waited months for the government's heat and building strategy. It's important because homes account for around 15% of all of the UK's carbon emissions. And the idea is to incentivise people to move to electricity by making them pay more for using gas. But will this work and is it fair? Who should pay for greening our homes? David, to you first.
I think we know a few things. The first is that this transition needs to happen. A recent study I saw suggested that actually twice as much emissions are coming from home heaters as are coming from all of the country's power emissions. We know that the country will be better off and prices will be cheaper in the medium and long term if we make this transition. And we know to this point that the prices that we have been paying don't reflect the true cost of burning these fuels. I think globally, the IMF believes that fossil fuels are being subsidized to the tune of $5 or $6 trillion every year. To me, the answer is quite clear that the government's role is to make sure that things that look appealing and attractive in the medium and long term can be afforded today. And I think for that reason, it's the government's role to be sure. Now, taxes can play a role there, but I'd like to see the UK government also doing more subsidy on the uptake end, on the electricity end, so that it's not just a stick approach, but also a carrot approach.
So who should be paying for it? Governments, consumers or industry? Alice, 28% of homeowners in the UK don't plan to eco-upgrade their homes. Are tax incentives the answer?
I mean, look, I can speak from the perspective of someone through my work in photography and filmmaking who's been travelling to climate front lines, and I can completely understand for UK homeowners this issue might feel distant, abstract, coming far down the line, but we really have an incredible amount of evidence. We've had it for decades, and if we needed any more, there have been historic flooding in Germany, historic wildfires across California. I would ask what other choice we have than to lead this transition, and I would speak of our sort of massive responsibility to do so, and to do so as quickly as possible. You know, the rate of we are in the UK, the home of the Industrial Revolution. We began this sort of hugely misguided fossil fuel experiment. And now I really believe that it's our role to lead the transition out of it. Is it going to be easy to retrofit 29 million homes? Absolutely not. But I would say that the cost of inaction far outweighs the cost of action. And you know, as David says, and as he painted so powerfully in his book, this is literally, we're talking about trillions of damage if we don't take action.
And just briefly, David, before we move on, how does the US compare by comparison? America, huge energy consumers, but also huge potential for renewables.
Well, we're not doing nearly as well as the UK. We have a much smaller share of renewable power. But we're on the brink, I hope, of making massive investments here to green our grid with the infrastructure and reconciliation bills that are being talked about right now. So I would say we're lagging behind, but I hope that if we were talking a month from now, the picture would look a lot greener.
OK, and just moving on to our next big subject of the day, a week after Prime Minister Boris Johnson said humanity is reaching a turning point on climate change, There's been a warning that people's anxiety levels over the issue is reaching an all-time high. Could scaring people too much end up preventing them from taking action? How do we find that balance? How should we deal with climate anxiety? Alice?
Well, the way we talk about climate is something I'm very preoccupied with. How do we tell this story, and how do we make people feel powerful and not powerless? I'm not sure I have the answer, but should we be concerned about eco-anxiety? 100%. And I would say that feeling anxiety in the face of headlines like, the IPCC's red code for humanity, scientists telling us untold suffering is coming down the line if we don't take action. These are entirely rational responses to the information that we are learning. I'm hearing about the rise of climate cafes across the UK, sort of workshop therapy sessions for young people. And I can't help but think about, not so long ago, young people, when they thought about the future, it was a future of flying cars, and now it's one that is very dystopian. But we have to talk not only about the sacrifice and not only about the dystopia, but also about the opportunities that we have to build a better and fairer and greener world.
As you mentioned there, Alice, young people certainly are the demographic that are going to have to deal with climate change for longer, and the demographic that are more concerned about it. 56% of young people, according to a recent poll, think humanity is doomed. David, how would you reassure them?
I think the opportunities are there to make sure the future is much more comfortable and much more attractive than the one they imagine reading the climate science headlines. That's because dramatic change is quite possible. It's not because the climate science is, being presented in a too scary manner. That is what the science says. If we don't change course, if we don't take action, the world will not resemble the one that our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents lived in. What we would have to do to live comfortably in that world is far beyond our imaginations, and we have to take seriously just how urgent the crisis is if we hope to respond to it. For those who worry about climate anxiety, I think it is real for people who are preoccupied with the subject, but I also think it is a motivator. I think if we look at the last few years, after the IPCC's 1.5 degree report, we saw the rise of Greta Thunberg and the school strikers. We saw the rise of Extinction Rebellion in the US. We saw the rise of Sunrise. And all of global climate geopolitics has changed in the aftermath of those protest movements, which were motivated by fear. They also offered positive visions of the future. I think those are important too. But they were driven primarily by anxiety. I think we should respond to how scary the science is by mobilizing, not by collapsing into despair. But I think we have to take seriously just how urgent the science says the matter really is.
And Alice, where would you strike the balance, just briefly before we let you go? The chair of the Climate Change Committee said if you scare the public, you don't get people to act. Do you believe that's true?
I think that, as David says, it's a motivating factor. For me, action is the antidote to anxiety. So, many of us may act from fear. It is not so productive to act from a place of fear. So how can you transform that emotion into something productive? Be an activist, whatever that means to you. It doesn't necessarily mean standing out on the street in protest. It means different things to all of us, but find what you're good at, find what you can contribute to the movement and play your part.
Alice Adey and David Wallace-Wells, thank you both very much indeed for joining us today.